You've found just stories, simple, heartfelt moments from real lives, stories that remind us how connected we all are through love, loss, and hope. Get cozy. The stories are about to begin. Masculine friendship is a special bond, one that can only be understood by those who have felt its depth and strength. For a man, a true comrade is sometimes closer than a blood brother. Such a friendship isn't born out of nothing and doesn't crumble from minor quarrels. Once it arises, it can last a lifetime, untouched by time or distance. Precisely such a loyal friend was Mark for David, 2 years his junior, from a troubled family. Mark's parents often hit the bottle, leaving him and his two younger sisters unsupervised. The children were eventually taken to Elmwood Home, from where Mark escaped after just a couple of weeks. But that time was enough for the parents, forgetting about the children, to change their place of residence, about the reasons for which various rumors circulated. He flatly refused to return to Elmwood Home. He was barely 14 years old then. He settled in his parents' old apartment, deciding to live independently. The guys who knew him almost from birth helped in any way they could. They brought clothes, food from home. They tried for a long time to hide that their comrade had escaped from Elmwood Home, but the truth is revealed sooner or later. The guardianship authorities returned the boy to its walls once again. Then David managed to persuade his parents to help his childhood friend. His father, a former military man, was able to find relatives willing to arrange guardianship over the boy, and his mother, Eleanor, a lawyer by profession, helped with the paperwork. From then on, David and Mark became more than just friends. They are spoken of as those who would go through fire and water together. The parents, of course, were not thrilled with such a friend, but they didn't voice their concerns to their son. David owed Mark his life. One day they found themselves on the bank of Willow Creek. The ice on Willow Creek had already melted significantly but still seemed strong. Taller and heavier, David tried to avoid places where water was already showing through, but it didn't save him. The big guy in a heavy father's sheepskin coat and felt boots instantly went under the ice. Fortunately, he was able to surface and grab the edge. His clothes quickly soaked through and pulled him down. His legs were already cramping. Fortunately, Mark didn't lose his head in that critical moment. They say that in moments of danger, a person gains incredible abilities, and apparently, this was just such a case. Skinny, short, Mark grabbed David by the collar of his coat and pulled him up. He himself later couldn't explain how he managed to pull out his tall friend in water-soaked clothes. Fear multiplied his strength tenfold, and he not only pulled out his comrade but also dragged him several meters away from the ice hole. The guys fell onto the snow exhausted, trying to catch their breath. A few minutes later, Mark raised his head and saw that David was crying, smearing snow and blood from a wound sustained during the fall across his face. "David, what's wrong? Did you break something?" he asked, trembling either from the cold or from resentment. "What? The wound, you mean? It's just a scratch. Don't whine, you're a boy. Did you finally manage to get into Dad's felt boots?" David croaked. "They're Dad's from the army, some kind of trophy. He'll kill me." "He'll kill you. Stop whimpering. He won't kill you. Let's go to my place now. You need to dry off. Otherwise he'll definitely kill both me and you. Your parents don't like me much as it is, and this way they'll forbid us from being friends altogether. But how can I go in one felt boot?" At that moment, 12-year-old David surprisingly resembled a small, naive, helpless child. For a couple of minutes, the boy thought, then took off his boots and gave them to his friend. He himself wrapped his foot in a scarf and put David's wet felt boot on his friend. In the evening, having dried his things as much as possible, David returned home. His Aunt Martha guessed from the dirty footprints in the hallway that the boys had gotten into trouble, but she didn't scold or inquire. She generally showed little interest in the boy, believing that this way he would become independent and serious faster. And Mark came down with severe pneumonia, but he never admitted what caused it. It was one of their many shared secrets, and David's parents never managed to find out what happened. About the missing felt boot, David said, "We tried to dry it on the stove, got carried away playing, didn't notice it burned up." The version was implausible, but David's parents had no choice but to believe it. The aunt who took guardianship, Martha, only tried to shoe and clothe the boy. She had no time to worry about his moral character, upbringing, or studies. Even the influence of good friends didn't help. At first, he simply stopped informing her where he was going and who he was spending time with. Then he started staying overnight at friends' places. To all her remarks, he replied invariably, "You're not my mother." He committed his first theft at 15. Mark was intensely preparing for exams for West Point at this time. The second theft was complicated by an attack on a guard, and Mark, along with his so-called friends, was sent to Blackgate Penitentiary. Despite not participating in the attack, the other guys dragged him along, and he considered refusing cowardly. The friendship, which began in the sandbox and survived many trials, didn't break off, but moved to another plane, that of memories and rare letters. David continued to be interested in his friend's life and tell about his own. Despite some letters coming from Blackgate Penitentiary and others from West Point, the guys still found common topics for communication. Perhaps that's what youth is good for, that during this time we are able to close our eyes to the insignificant and see only the good in people. David's parents were wary of their son's communication with a guy of questionable reputation, but they had long given him the freedom to choose his own friends. David would later give the same freedom of choice to his children and wouldn't regret it. A person either learns to take responsibility or to shift it onto others, then blaming everyone around for their life not working out. David, after West Point, entered Fort Leavenworth, then began to rapidly climb the career ladder. He got married, and twins were born into the family, a son and a daughter. Life flowed calmly. News from his old friend came less and less often until they stopped altogether. In his last letters, Mark practically stopped talking about himself, only once mentioning in passing that he was lucky enough to meet a real angel in his life. He himself didn't go into detail, and David decided not to pry into his soul with questions. Through his acquaintances, David repeatedly found out that Mark was alive but in prison again. There had been many such times in his life. It seemed he had become so accustomed to such a life that freedom no longer beckoned him. He didn't know how to settle down, how to earn a living, and was there even a point in changing? Everything was familiar and known there. Mark's parents had already left this world by then, and the aunt who took Mark didn't live long either. Only old acquaintances remained in his hometown, Oakhaven, so Mark practically never came there. Several times he tried to sell the old apartment, but there were no buyers. Letting in tenants was also dangerous. There was no one to travel and look after it, and running into dishonest people was too likely. However, unexpectedly, David's classmate Linda decided to gather former classmates, and David happened to have a small vacation. At a family council, it was decided to give the head of the family a couple of days off and send him to his hometown, Oakhaven. At the same time, he intended to visit his parents' grave and drop by his class teachers. His wife, Sarah, didn't go with her husband, as she had urgent matters at her shop. September 1st was approaching, which meant the demand for flowers would instantly increase, and popular items needed to be ordered. At Central Station, changing trains to his hometown Oakhaven, David noticed an elderly man who struggled to get into the carriage and sat by the window. Something about his appearance seemed surprisingly familiar. He sat so as not to lose sight of the man, observing discreetly. It seemed this old man was significantly younger than his years. David himself was barely 40 at that time, the prime of life, as his wife said. They frequented the fitness club together, loved active recreation. A healthy lifestyle and warm family relationships had a beneficial effect on their appearance. Even among colleagues, David looked significantly younger than many. Most military men, having reached certain heights, stopped taking care of themselves, gained excess weight, and looked awkward during exercises, sweating profusely in the heat. David always set an example of excellent physical fitness, easily completing forced marches running or skiing. His wife, Sarah, also often attracted men's attention with her toned figure and perfect appearance. Her husband didn't make scenes. On the contrary, he was proud that his wife was an ideal for many. Their children were often told that their parents looked like their older brother and sister. The man David was carefully observing looked over 60. Gray hair, sunken, stubble-covered cheeks, a hunched back, and a terrible cough betrayed his age. There were moments when he almost suffocated trying to cough. Every half hour he went out into the tambour, took a drag, held his breath for a long time, and released clouds of acrid smoke. David, who couldn't stand the smell of tobacco and alcohol since childhood, shuddered every time he looked at the man. His father, Robert, who had never smoked a single cigarette or touched alcohol in his life, instilled a healthy lifestyle in him, while being a model of integrity for David. Apparently, this man hadn't been so lucky in life if he found joy in harmful habits that destroyed his health. The strangest thing was that David, who had an excellent memory for faces, couldn't remember the man at all. He had absolutely never seen him before, but there was something familiar about his appearance. The man was returning from the tambour after another smoke break, and suddenly their eyes met. Surprisingly, the man's eyes were young, although surrounded by a deep network of wrinkles. It seemed he was also struck by the thought that David seemed familiar to him. But David's memory or appearance was significantly better. Genuine joy flashed on his face, and in an impulse he took a few steps forward. Then, as if remembering something, his face changed sharply. He turned around and quickly walked back into the tambour, and from there into the next carriage. For a few seconds David was frozen, and then almost ran to catch up with the man, not believing his eyes until the end. Mark! It was Mark! His childhood friend, the daredevil, the hooligan, and the brawler. Mark, who saved him when David fell through the ice. Mark, who couldn't live in the state-run Elmwood home and then spent most of his life in prisons, prematurely aged, hunched, thin, and sick. But it was him. David had no doubt. Despite his completely changed appearance, he recognized the old friend's gaze, direct, slightly cheeky. David practically ran through the next two carriages, scanning the passengers as he went. At this time, the conductor announced a stop at Oakwood, and David saw through the window that Mark had gotten off the train and was walking quickly towards Oakhaven. It was still about half an hour's ride to his hometown Oakhaven, but the man couldn't miss the opportunity to talk to his friend. So, without thinking, he jumped from the train step and ran after the receding figure of his friend. "Mark! Mark!" he called out. Mark saw that his friend quickened his pace upon hearing his name called. Fortunately, healthy, physically active David ran fast, and so after a couple of minutes, he caught up with his friend and stopped in front of him, blocking his path. "Mark, you recognize me too. Why did you run off?" "Buddy, go on. I don't know you." With these words, Mark tried to bypass David. The smoke-stained, hoarse voice resembled Mark's voice, but David already doubted. Had he made a mistake? Perhaps he wanted so much to believe that upon returning to his hometown Oakhaven, he would meet his old friend, that he had mistaken some stranger who remotely reminded him of Mark. Less confidently, he turned to the man again. "Mark, come on. I saw how happy you were to see me there in the carriage. You couldn't not recognize me. Are you offended that I didn't write?" "But it's not my fault I didn't know your address. I wrote as much as I could, and then I tried to find out where you were, how you were. I've been living in the same place for many years. Is that what you're offended about?" "Buddy, I'm not a woman to be offended. You've mistaken me for someone else." The man started looking around as if afraid of being overheard, and then said quieter, "Mark, you shouldn't be seen near me. Go away. Why do you need problems?" David barely restrained himself from rushing to hug his old friend, despite his warnings. "Mark, you old devil, but thank God. I thought I was losing my mind. How are you?" "Pretend you didn't hear the questions. Keep looking around," the man said. "Go to Oakwood. The next train is in an hour. You won't get to Oakhaven from here by anything else." "Are you going to your parents?" "No parents, been 5 years already. It's a shame, they were good people." "And who are you going to see?" "To them, to their grave. Decided to get together for the class reunion. I'll be home if you need anything. Come by in the evening." "I'll stop by." With these words, Mark walked on with a quick step, as much as his limp allowed, and David went back to Oakwood. What happened seemed like a dream or a very lucky coincidence. It was precisely on his rare visit to his hometown Oakhaven that he was lucky enough to see a person with whom fate had separated him many years ago. School years flashed through his memory like a whirlwind, their friendship with this brave, desperate, and sometimes reckless guy. How many things he invented, how many times they got into trouble because of him, how many times he brought his friend home, hungry as a wolf cub, and fed him, and the friend tried to take the best pieces with him for his sisters. Yes, Mark's life was not easy even in his youth, and it seemed to have battered him severely since then. He looked like a real old man. David remembered his 70-year-old father, Robert, shortly before his death. Mark looked significantly older now. Waiting for the next train, he went to his hometown Oakhaven and first headed to the Oakhaven house. If his friend came in the evening, he needed to be properly welcomed, just like back then, in childhood. He remembered that there was a meeting with school friends today, but decided it could wait. Mark was more important to him. Besides, his behavior had worried the man. Calling Linda, he warned her not to expect him at the meeting. Unforeseen important matters had arisen. The woman was noticeably upset. It seemed the whole meeting had been organized specifically for him. David even remembered that she had shown him attention in school. She was a model girl, matured early, and he was still naive about relationships with the opposite sex then. Only a military career was on his mind. Although when he met Sarah, he decided that this girl would become his wife someday. In the evening there was a quiet knock at the door, and almost immediately the door opened, and Mark entered. "Still haven't learned to lock doors, just like your parents," Mark smiled, and for a minute he was the same as David remembered him, and they hadn't seen each other for almost a quarter of a century. "Yes, it's my habit. My wife constantly scolds me. Less now, she's used to it. Been married a long time. Tell me about yourself." "I'll tell you. Come in. I've put something together for our unexpected meeting. Remember, you used to always try to feed me. You couldn't stand that I was skinny and small, and you were healthy even though you were younger than me?" Mark smiled again, remembering their carefree childhood. "I remember. It's strange who I took after. My parents were thin, but I grew like a weed. Only at West Point did I discipline myself, eat less, and spend more time on sports. By Fort Leavenworth, I was already built and toned. My children are thin too. Apparently, I took after the neighbor. Remember there was a fat old man living on our landing? Your parents would hear you. You always blurt things out without thinking." The friends spent half the evening reminiscing and talking. David noted that Mark immediately went for the bottle, which David, who didn't drink himself, had brought just symbolically. Under the influence of the alcohol, Mark became more relaxed, even a bit rough, although it was clear he was trying to control himself. At the beginning of the evening, he either avoided questions about his life or answered evasively. After drinking, his tongue loosened, and he told David the sad story of his life. "Listen to this. You have a wife, children, a career, and I have nothing to tell. Only how I changed prisons and committed crimes. The only thing I can be proud of is that I never harmed a single living creature, didn't even touch animals. And theft? Who among us hasn't done it? Only not everyone got caught. And you know about my first mugshots, from my youth, out of foolishness. It was hard, scary in prison back then. I wanted to be free, with friends, for adventures, for fun. But that fun always led me back behind bars. And life there is anything but sweet. I won't tell you everything. You don't need to know." Only once, a cellmate of mine received a letter from his sister, and it had her photo in it. She was 22, I was 25. You wouldn't believe how many girls I had, but this one really struck a chord. I asked permission to write, and you won't believe it, she replied. We started corresponding. I even started behaving well. I was desperate to be free to be with her. I got out, came to her, but her parents threw me out. They didn't know about our correspondence. I spent a month wearing out the doorstep of her apartment, begging, persuading. I even got a job to prove I had changed, but they wouldn't budge. In short, I backed off a bit, decided to give them time. I started living a normal life. That was probably the best year of my entire life. I got a job as a loader. I had money. I spent it all on her, buying her gifts. She refused to take them, though, but I had a reason to work, to live a normal life. Her parents only lowered their guard 6 months after I arrived, and we started meeting secretly. But everything secret becomes known sooner or later. Anna got pregnant. Her parents found out. We couldn't do an abortion, the term was already advanced, and her health was weak. In short, they filed a report against me and I went back to prison. And soon after, she gave birth to my daughter. I have nothing. I haven't seen my daughter a single time. She's almost 15. She doesn't even know my name or who I am at all. Her parents strictly forbade their daughter from telling the girl anything about me. Became friends. What are you talking about? As soon as her father, Mr. Smith, found out I was going to see her after prison, he ambushed me with his buddies and beat me up. Who needs a relative like that? She's smart, beautiful. She just finished college. The fact that she replied to my letter back then was nothing short of a miracle. In short, my daughter grew up without me, and I never managed to fix my life. I just kept drifting, changing prisons. Until one day I received a letter from her. She wrote that she was very ill. I honestly lost it. I had 5 years left on my sentence, and the doctors didn't give her more than a year. Do you understand? My Anna, my beloved. I never loved anyone else ever again. I had no one after her. Everyone seemed the same, brainless, empty. In short, I ran away. I ran away to see her before it was too late. That's why I got scared when I saw you. No one here remembers me anymore, and if they do, they probably wouldn't recognize me. Life has tossed me around, but it's okay. At least I'll live the last few years free. Even if they look for me, I won't surrender alive. I thought I'd lie low and then figure out how to live on. After that, I went straight to her. She lived not far from here. I made it. I made it. I went to the hospital to see her for a whole week. Her parents didn't forbid it anymore. They were old, and I wouldn't have harmed her. But they didn't let me near my daughter. They only let me see her from a distance. And they didn't tell her who I was. She's gone. Yes, she burned out like a candle. And soon after, both her parents, Mr. and Mrs. Smith, too. Yes, her mother only survived her by a week. Her heart couldn't take it. And her father by 2. That's the thing, my friend. My daughter is left alone. The orphanage is looming over her. Help me. I'm asking you as a friend. Take her under guardianship. Figure something out. Your parents, remember, they helped me out. They didn't abandon me. They found relatives. And does your daughter have anyone besides you? And her Uncle James. I can't. And her uncle drinks. Since he got out of prison, he hasn't been able to live normally. They won't give him the child. I can look for relatives who can arrange guardianship for her. Friend, I'll be indebted to you for the rest of my life. Ask for anything, just don't let her end up in the orphanage. The rest of the evening the men spent talking about children and how to help the girl. Mark, weakened and exhausted, quickly got drunk and fell asleep. And David didn't sleep for a long time, thinking and recalling the past day. Besides the issue with the girl, he had to decide how to tell his wife and children everything, how they would react, whether they would understand him, whether they would judge him for having such a friend. In the end, the man concluded that it was best for them to know nothing. He could make inquiries without informing them. However, he needed to act quickly. In the morning, he called everyone who could help in any way. Different options were suggested, even taking the girl under guardianship himself. This option seemed the most sensible to him. A 15-year-old girl is practically an adult. In a couple of years, she will be completely independent. He and his wife would look after her, and they would meet her father. In short, he decided to pursue this direction. For now, he didn't voice his plans. He promised to help, left money for the initial period, and allowed Mark to live in his parents' Oakhaven house. It had been empty for many years anyway. He himself needed to return home. How was the class reunion? His wife Sarah met him as if he hadn't been away for a couple of days, but for a year. "Oh, it was fine. Everyone's gotten old, put on weight, become uninteresting. Not much to talk about with anyone," he lied. The feeling was disgusting. He wasn't lying to his wife. He thought it was better to say nothing. Why lie to a loved one's face? Not with anyone at all? And your friend you told me about, wasn't he there? We didn't go to school with him. He's older than me. Didn't you see him either? No, he lied again. His wife was surprised that her husband returned thoughtful, quiet, and taciturn. He often went out onto the stairs to talk on the phone and constantly received messages. He answered all questions monosyllabically. Like any woman, she decided that on this trip he had met some old love. Old feelings had flared up, and that's why he was tormented and withdrawn. She didn't want to think about the fact that he had left the city more than 25 years ago and had hardly been there since. Finding the most obvious reason, in her opinion, she didn't consider other possibilities. And things with the guardianship over his friend's daughter were going well. He managed to arrange a delay in sending her to the orphanage, but he needed to urgently come to the city and bring documents. He told his wife he was being sent on a business trip. However, she found train tickets to the same city he had recently gone to for the reunion. The puzzle pieces fit, and the woman was finally convinced her husband had someone else. And the next day she saw him in a store. He was buying clothes, warm teenage clothes. Who could he be buying them for? Their daughter Emily's size was significantly larger. It turned out that he not only had an old love somewhere, but also a child. His wife Sarah couldn't bear such betrayal. Her first impulse was to go up to her husband and find out everything. Later she would often regret not doing so, because then she would have spared herself suffering, uncertainty, and the unknown. But all that would come later. For now, she said nothing to her husband, returned home, and waited for her husband to return with explanations. However, as it turned out, patience and humility were never her strong suits. So she decided to find out everything herself. Following her husband, she remembered both the train number and the destination, so she bought a ticket for the same train. To be honest, she regretted giving in to the momentary impulse already on the train, but it was too late to turn back. She called the children and warned them that she and their dad would be away for a couple of days. Her more perceptive son, Tom, understood from his mother's voice that something was wrong. "Mom, is everything okay? You never went anywhere without us." "Dad has a business trip, and I decided to go with him so I wouldn't be bored. I had accumulated some time off work." Her son pretended to believe her, but his mother's explanation worried him even more. David, not suspecting that his poor cover story and his wife's imagination could threaten the existence of their family, anxiously considered further actions. The best way out would be for Mark to surrender, and then for David himself to handle the adoption. However, Mark confidently stated that he would not return to prison. He didn't ask further, deciding he would return to this conversation later. At that moment, it couldn't even cross his mind how drastically his life would change. For now, he was simply going to meet the girl, his friend's daughter, who didn't even know who her father really was. Anna and her parents, Mr. and Mrs. Smith, who had reluctantly allowed Mark to spend the last week near her, had categorically forbidden him from seeing his daughter, and the girl was brought to her mother in such a way that she wouldn't cross paths with her father. He used all his acquaintances and connections, of which there weren't that many. Since the girl was already quite old, he was allowed to arrange guardianship for her. However, she could still end up in the orphanage at any moment. All her property, Anna's and Mr. and Mrs. Smith's, would transfer to her, but she could only formalize the necessary documents after she turned 18. She was currently attending college, but social workers were checking on her. As he was informed, the girl was very independent, quiet, and modest, like her mother and maternal grandparents, explained his acquaintance Linda, who was helping him with the paperwork. "And do you know who the father is?" "Yes, an old friend of mine. He wrote me a letter and asked for help." "And why doesn't he handle the documents himself?" "He's in prison." He didn't lie about the kind of person the girl's father was, but he didn't say that he had also escaped. "Wonderful! Where in your crystal-clear biography did such a friend come from?" In childhood, we don't choose friends. We just become friends. And then such bonds form that you can't break them. Besides, I owe him my life. Could I really refuse him such a request? Oh, that honesty and integrity of yours will get you into trouble someday. What did your wife say about all this? She's not against it. She doesn't know, he admitted honestly. And honestly, I don't even know how I'm going to tell her everything. Are you serious? You're taking guardianship of an adult girl who doesn't know you or her father, who recently lost all her relatives, and you haven't even talked to your wife and children. Where will you bring her? Where will she live? What will she wear? How will the scholarship issue be resolved? Connections are good, of course, but I can't cover for you indefinitely. My good advice to you is, talk to your wife and tell her everything. Otherwise, you risk changing your life drastically, and it's not certain it will be for the better. The acquaintance who helped with the paperwork was the same classmate, Linda. Communicating with her somewhat burdened the man, as she was subtly hinting at a closer relationship. Therefore, her concern for his family didn't seem sincere, quite the opposite. But there was sense in her words. Secrets from his wife could destroy their ideal marriage. After this conversation, he truly wanted to talk to his wife, but that evening Mark called him to find out how things were progressing. During the conversation, he coughed terribly. He didn't like this cough, and he directly asked his friend about his health. Everything's bad. That's why I bolted. The doctor there only gave me a couple of months, and there I also found out about Anna's illness. Everything just came together. In short, I'll be gone after her soon. Thank God I met you then, through fire, and now I can die peacefully, knowing you won't abandon my daughter. After these words, he coughed heavily again, and David understood. He needed to go to his friend urgently, otherwise he might not get to see him alive. Mark had strictly forbidden him from contacting doctors. He arrived a couple of days later. He didn't tell his wife. Just then, his acquaintance Linda informed him that the guardianship documents were ready, and he could take the girl in. Only she didn't have warm clothes. She had grown over the summer, and not all her bones were still small. The next day he bought everything necessary and left for his hometown. At that time, he didn't know that his wife was traveling with him on the same train and saw the situation completely differently. In the evening, he and Mark discussed what to do next. Have you even seen your daughter? Talked to her? No, and there's no point. Here's what I've come up with these past few days. Let's tell her you're her father. Right, and my family will kick me out, and no one will believe it. I lived very far away when she was born. I finished my studies, got my first assignment. The children were just starting kindergarten. But no one will believe I could have been running around on the side away from my wife at that time, and I don't want to bring a child into the family and start with a lie. Let's say I'm a very distant relative. It's also a lie, but at least it won't threaten my family. We'll figure something out. No, we won't figure anything out ourselves. I'll pick her up tomorrow and bring her here. You'll talk to her and tell her everything yourself. No. Why not? He sincerely didn't understand why his friend was so resistant. After all, he loved the girl's mother, Anna, and would have loved her too, but circumstances didn't allow it. Because, look at yourself and look at me. What kind of father would you want? A handsome, fit officer or a sick, dying convict? You're silent? Exactly, and I don't want her to get a father like that. It wouldn't even cross my mind to be ashamed of my parents. Because you got those parents. And I was ashamed from childhood, always drunk, dirty, abandoning me and my sisters. Even though I lived with my Aunt Martha, I still went down the wrong path. And as for my sisters, there's nothing to say. They couldn't make a life for themselves. He didn't ask what Mark meant when he spoke of his sisters. He himself didn't remember them well. The girls were no more than 5 when they were taken to the orphanage, and they never returned home. Mark visited them several times, but he always came back looking like a dark cloud. Life in the orphanage was never easy, and even less so for 2 small girls. She didn't have a father at all. I was told she's a quiet and modest girl. Tell her the truth, don't hide it. It will be easier for you. At that moment there was a knock at the door, and both men jumped up as if on command. 2 hours earlier, his wife Sarah, following her husband, got off the train at the station. Since she didn't know where he was going, she decided not to lose sight of him. He transferred to a suburban train. She sat behind him, guessing he was going to his hometown. She had never visited her in-laws, Robert and Eleanor, and was afraid of getting lost in an unfamiliar city. It seemed her husband was so deeply immersed in his own thoughts that he paid no attention to anything around him. A couple of times, he almost noticed his wife, his indifferent gaze sweeping over her. He seemed to have faded in a few days, turning from cheerful and lively to thoughtful and gloomy. Seeing her husband enter a house in one of the districts again, and then the second-floor entrance, she decided to sit on a bench and think. She needed to calm down, collect her thoughts, and decide how to start the conversation and how to explain her presence in her husband's hometown. After sitting for about half an hour, she decided to go up to the entrance and talk to her husband. After all, sitting here, she wouldn't find out anything. If he was there with a woman, then so be it. They would divorce. She loved her husband, but she would never agree to share him with anyone. The woman never thought that climbing a couple of dozen steps would be such a difficult task for her. Her legs completely refused to obey, her hands became cold as ice, and her temples began to throb. Gathering her strength, she raised her hand and knocked. Muffled voices were heard in the apartment, which fell silent after her knock. "It's me!" They stood up as if on command, silently exchanged glances, trying to understand who could be knocking at a door that had stood for many years without residents. "Are you expecting someone?" Mark asked quietly. "Are you out of your mind? I didn't even tell anyone where I was going. I've been covering my tracks for months, getting on one train, then another. I traveled by electric trains and buses so they wouldn't track where I was going. In the end, I didn't show my face outside that hospital. Maybe it's someone for you? That one of yours who won't leave you alone? Or one of the neighbors?" "Well, maybe, although I haven't really talked to anyone and asked them to call before coming. You hide and I'll open it. If it's for me, I'll jump off the balcony." "Where are you going? You can barely walk. Sit down, don't move. If it were the police, they probably wouldn't be so polite, knocking on doors and waiting for an answer." Mark, of course, decided it was the police for him. Rushing to the balcony, he began to calculate if he could run after jumping from the second floor. David, understanding what his friend was about to do, silently grabbed him and pushed him into the room that had once been his parents' bedroom. It locked from the inside, and the windows faced a quiet courtyard. "Sit quietly and don't do anything stupid. Maybe some neighbor saw me. I'm not going back to prison. They can take me down if they try to arrest me, but I'm not going back there. Sit quietly. Maybe it will pass." He quietly closed the door and headed for the front door. The peephole didn't allow him to make out the figures, but it was clear it wasn't the police, and they weren't there for him. How great was his surprise when, opening the door, he found his wife Sarah on the threshold, who had lied so shamelessly about a business trip yesterday, and from whom he had been hiding the fact that another child would soon appear in their family for several days. "What are you doing here?" "I wanted to ask you the same question. Did you also go on a business trip?" "I did go." Seeing his wife's eyes, he understood that he could no longer and did not want to lie to her. "Come in. I'll tell you everything now, and you can decide." Letting his wife into the apartment and closing the door behind her, he went to the small room and knocked on the bedroom door. "Come out. It's for me. This is my childhood friend. I told you about him," he said, pointing to his friend coming out of the room. It was noticeable that his wife was surprised by her friend's appearance. "You said he was older than you, but I didn't think he was old enough to be your father." "Hello. I'm only 2 years older. Life has just been very hard. Sit down. I'll tell you everything now. I'll just make you some tea. You're completely frozen." Only now did she notice that she was shaking with cold, and her hands still hadn't warmed up. Perhaps she hadn't expected to sit in light clothing in the cold for half an hour. For the next hour, David and Mark took turns telling her about the circumstances that had brought them together in this apartment today. She listened and couldn't believe her ears. On the one hand, she was glad that her fears about a mistress were unfounded, but on the other hand, She was surprised that her husband had made such an important and responsible decision without informing her. She also honestly told them about her fears and thoughts of a mistress. Now that the reason for her husband's mysterious behavior was known, the woman even felt a little awkward about her suspicions. So, my dear, we now have an important decision to make, to take another child into our family. You've already made that decision. We need to decide how to tell the girl who we are and who her real father is. And I didn't know, Mark said. They forbade me from even mentioning her, so as not to upset Anna. And she hardly spoke due to medication and barely recognized me. I know, they gave me all her details. I just wanted to introduce her to you tomorrow. Well, the girl's name is Lily. All the emotions that overwhelmed Mark at that moment were reflected in his eyes. David hadn't seen men cry for a long time. Stern military men, his friends and colleagues, didn't allow themselves such weakness. His father, Robert, also considered tears a disgrace for a man his whole life. Mark looked at his friend with eyes full of tears and couldn't hold them back. Anna, his dear and beloved, his only beloved, had given their daughter his name. Mark couldn't control his emotions for a long time. His wife Sarah even had to rummage through her purse and find a sedative pill, under the influence of which he quickly fell asleep, and she and her husband had a long and serious conversation ahead of them. The woman didn't want arguments, shouting, and scandals. She understood her husband couldn't have acted otherwise, but his secrecy hurt her. He had been silent for so many days, deciding something, inventing things, although he had never before kept secrets from his wife. The only exception was his work. Sarah knew absolutely nothing about it and was never interested in it. Otherwise, they had no secrets from each other. Over their many years of marriage, they had managed to maintain a wonderful relationship. They met when he was a cadet at cadet school. Handsome, tall, athletic, many girls were smitten with him, but he chose his wife, Sarah. She studied at the local college near his school. Girls from her class often went to discos at the neighboring barracks hoping to meet a handsome cadet. But she wasn't interested in military boys at all, and she didn't consider herself old enough for dates with boys. David noticed her when she was walking in the park with her friends. Then he singled her out for her modest appearance. Of all the girls, only she had long hair and a modest dress. However, approaching her turned out to be not the easiest task. He even volunteered to paint the famous red stripes on the Suvorov Monument. This is how the Kursk cadets celebrated their graduation annually. They didn't dare entrust this responsible task to just anyone. Only the most reckless took on such a thing. David was one of the well-behaved ones who were never allowed to do such things, but he wanted to surprise the girl he liked with something, so he volunteered. When he entered West Point after graduating from cadet school, the girl mustered the courage and went to apply to a college in the same city. Her parents supported her decision and never regretted allowing their daughter to attend City College after 9th grade, after which she went to City University, located near West Point, where David was studying. The young people decided to get married in their second year. Everyone told them then that such early marriages often ended in separation, but they loved each other so much that they simply paid no attention to such predictions. A year later, twins were born into the young family, a son, Tom, and a daughter, Emily. That's when his wife Sarah fully realized how successful her choice of life partner had been. Her husband, despite being at work or studying all day, tried to let his wife sleep at night, getting up for the children, changing diapers. He even learned to make formula in a half-asleep state. Contrary to popular belief, parental leave not only didn't test their strength, it actually strengthened their union. Sarah studied part-time, planned to send the children to kindergarten and go back to work. David suggested she learn some work for the soul. His career involved periodic transfers, changing cities and positions. He managed to get a very good posting in a large city near West Point City, capital city. His wife Sarah, with a teaching degree, initially got a job at the local school, but couldn't stand the complete lack of free time, the workload, and the constant complaints from management and parents. That's when the hobby courses she had taken came in handy. She found herself in floristry and design. First, she grew a beautiful garden at home, and then learned to arrange bouquets, wrap gifts, and 2 years later opened a small flower shop. David was fortunate to stay at the same place of duty for a long time. His wife's business slowly but surely moved uphill. She was able to open 2 more shops, expanded the range. At first, only her husband helped and supported her, and then the children did too. By the age of 40, his wife Sarah, to the envy of her friends, looked beautiful. She had a beloved and loving husband, wonderful children. Their son Tom decided to follow in his father's footsteps, and their daughter Emily studied design. In general, her life until recently seemed ideal to her. Her friends were openly envious, her subordinates never tired of praising and thanking her, and her children delighted her with their successes. And now their marriage was facing a serious test. The woman was glad that her fears and doubts about his fidelity were unfounded, but the fact that he was ready to change their life so drastically was disconcerting. She truly didn't understand how they would live on. In essence, young Lily was a complete stranger to them, and if her husband hadn't agreed to help his old friend, she would have remained a stranger to them. Now they were taking responsibility for another child with her own character, interests, and on top of everything, who had recently lost all her relatives. His wife Sarah also believed that the girl had the right to know her real father, and she and her husband decided to try again tomorrow to convince Mark to tell his daughter everything. Fortunately, the issue of finances didn't arise. Their adult children were already partially financially independent. Their parents only gave them money for large purchases. Otherwise, both their son Tom and daughter Emily were independent. His wife Sarah tried not to think about how they would react to the new family member for now. David didn't try to justify himself or invent other ways out of the situation. "My dear, I couldn't have done otherwise. He has no one but me. It turns out the girl doesn't either. I didn't tell you because I didn't fully understand what I was getting into myself. Haven't you realized after so many years of marriage that I'm with you in any situation, good or bad? But now it's not just about you and me. It's about the girl who doesn't know us at all. It's about our children who will now have to accept and love a girl they don't know at all. I'm not even talking about the fact that Lily might be against moving in with us. She's an adult. She makes such decisions herself. By the way, how is she herself? Is she ready for a new family?" My acquaintance Linda, who helped me gather the guardianship documents, said that the girl is in a state of shock, but is not against moving. As far as I understood, she is quite withdrawn, quiet. It's still unknown whether that's good or bad. Sometimes it's very difficult to reach an understanding with quiet people. We'll manage, I'm sure. You have no idea how often I thank fate for a wife like you. You chose me yourself, his wife Sarah said with a smile. It's late. We should try to get a couple of hours of sleep. Tomorrow is a hard day, plus the journey home. By the way, what about Mark? He's very ill. He needs to go to a hospital. The police are looking for him. We can't even call an ambulance. Wanted notices for him have already appeared around the city. Repeat offender, criminal. But he's just a sick, life-beaten, unhappy man who doesn't have much time left. I honestly don't know what to do with him. I'm not a little child to worry about. Mark entered unexpectedly, as if he had been standing behind the door for a long time. Nevertheless, Sarah is right. You need help. You've already helped me, and you don't owe me anything more. You repaid the debt to me long ago for pulling you out of the ice hole back then, and you didn't owe me anything. You would have gone in after me too if I had fallen through. So tomorrow we'll say goodbye. I'll go to... If I'm alive, I'll write. Well, if not, don't remember me ill." David and his wife Sarah exchanged glances, understanding that arguing was pointless. Indeed, Mark was capable of deciding how to live on his own. But David's heart was uneasy. "Mark, are you sure you shouldn't tell her? After all, you could tell her, without touching on the topic of prison. Say that you are very ill and that's why you can't take her yourself. No, I don't want to. And to lie. It's better to say nothing at all." It was clear that the man was hesitating, but David didn't press him. The decision remained his in any case. The next morning, leaving Mark in the Oakhaven house, David and his wife Sarah went to get Lily in Riverton. She had been there for several days because the guardianship paperwork process had dragged on a bit, and the guardianship authorities couldn't leave her alone in Riverton without adult supervision any longer. While they were handling the bureaucratic matters, a short, thin girl quietly entered the room. She looked about 10 or 12 years old. She didn't look at all like an adult 15-year-old teenager. Her long, light brown hair was braided. David recognized his friend's features in her at first glance, the same eyes, build, hair color. Only Mark's gaze was cheerful, slightly cheeky, while Lily's was sad and thoughtful. She quietly said hello, asked if she could go home to pack her things. Apparently she had already been told that she would be living in another city. The girl hardly looked up at David and his wife Sarah. The child psychologist who worked with her after she arrived at the institution reported that her behavior was just the beginning. The realization of loneliness and the loss of loved ones would come later, and it was difficult to predict how she would behave. Having settled all the formalities, the couple ordered a taxi to take Lily to her home to pack her things. The departure was planned for late evening, so his wife Sarah suggested Lily visit her friends to say goodbye. "I don't have friends," the girl said quietly. "There's no one to say goodbye to. No one at all. Yes, I had some in primary school, but then my mother enrolled me in music and art schools in ballet and with several tutors. There was no time left for friends. That's why they decided it wasn't interesting to be friends with me." "How wonderful you are. You dance, play music, and study." "Yes, I guess," the girl said in a colorless voice. It seemed that her activities didn't make her happy at all, and she didn't feel proud of them either. At home, she packed photos, some personal belongings of hers, her mother's, Anna's, and her grandparents', Mr. and Mrs. Smith's, and clothes. His wife Sarah was surprised that the girl walked past the shelf with numerous medals, cups, and certificates several times without even looking at them, as if she considered them completely insignificant junk that had no place in a small suitcase. "Lily, if you can't fit everything now, we can come back soon to pick up the rest. I know the way now. I can bring you here. It's not necessary. I'll try to take only the essentials." The girl paused for a moment and added, "I was never called anything other than Lily. If you like it, I'll call you that too." "Didn't you like it when I called you Lily?" his wife Sarah asked. "I don't know. It feels strange somehow. Do you have children?" The girl showed interest in those who were to become her family for the first time. "Yes, we have grown-up children, a son, Tom, and a daughter, Emily, twins. They are 20 years old now. Our son will be a military man, like his father and grandfather, and our daughter chose a fashionable field, design. She loved to draw very much, just like you. She went to art school. She had a talent for it from a very young age. I didn't have talent. We had a desire from my mother and grandparents to load me like a workhorse. I never liked drawing or dancing. I'm not a fan of showing myself in public at all. I'd rather sit quietly in a corner where no one would bother me. I always asked my mother to have a little brother or sister for me. How wonderful it must be to have a brother or sister, especially from birth. You are born with a best friend right away." "But I wouldn't say they became best friends from birth," his wife Sarah laughed. "Rather, they were born with a comrade for mischief and a partner for fights." "That's what I meant. I always wanted a big family, but my mother was her parents' only daughter, and I am hers too." "And do you know anything about your father?" his wife Sarah asked cautiously. "Yes, a little. Actually, my mother secretly told me, hiding it from my grandparents, that he was a good person. He just got into bad circumstances. He loved her, and she believed that her whole life and said that he loved me too, even though he couldn't see me." "And did she tell you anything else?" "Only that his name is also Mark." "And would you like to meet him?" "Of course. Honestly, I hoped your husband was my father, until I learned his name." At that moment, Mark entered the room. Seeing him, the girl returned to packing her things. "Lily, we'll leave you. We won't disturb you. Get ready," his wife Sarah said to the girl, and she took her husband's arm and led him to the kitchen, quietly closing the door behind them. Mark, she knows. Both about her father and his name. You appeared at the wrong time. Maybe she would have told me something else. The girl is withdrawn, of course. We can't hide from her that her father is alive and nearby. What if he leaves this world and she never even sees him? I completely agree with you. But what about the police? Listen, you and I have to raise and educate this girl. We need to think about what's best for her. That's why, as a guardian, I decided to introduce her to her father. But since my general has decided, why should I argue? David smiled, hugging his wife. An hour later, they were climbing the stairs to David's parents' Oakhaven house. A taxi was waiting for them at Lily's place, loaded with several suitcases that his wife Sarah had helped Lily pack. She packed everything that could help the girl adapt to the new place. The girl didn't ask why they stopped here. It seemed she was under the influence of sedatives. As the psychologist explained, her psyche had indeed shut down from the outside world to make it easier to cope with the loss. Opening up and pulling her out of this shell would take a long time and require gentleness. Approaching the door, David opened it and asked his wife Sarah and Lily to come in a little later when he called them. Closing the door behind him, David was surprised at how quiet it was in the house, as if no one was there. Walking into the living room and bedroom, he found that Mark was sleeping, lying face to the wall. "Mark, why are you lying down in the daytime?" the man said softly, and gently touched his friend's shoulder. He didn't respond, so David decided to shake him harder and tried to turn him onto his back. However, it was difficult to do so. His friend seemed to have curled into a stiff ball. At that moment, David understood what was wrong. Taking Mark's hand, he tried to feel for a pulse without much hope. Although from how cold the hand was, it was clear. His friend had quietly passed away in his sleep. Most likely several hours ago, rigor mortis had already set in. He couldn't let his wife and Lily see this, so he quickly got up and went out to them on the landing. From her husband's look, his wife Sarah understood. Something bad had happened. Meeting his wife's eyes, David shook his head, explaining everything without words. "Lily, I already told you, this is David's parents' house. He, Mark, came by to pick up some documents. Go down to the car, I'll catch up with you in a moment." Even a younger child would hardly have believed such a ridiculous explanation, but his wife Sarah was incapable of anything more. When the girl slammed the door of the house, she turned to her husband with a question. "Am I going with her alone? Are you staying for the funeral?" "I guess that's what I'll have to do. I don't even know what to do about the fact that he's wanted. God forbid they'll arrest me for harboring a fugitive." "You'll say that you came to Oakhaven to check on the house and found him. I don't know what else to say. Try to tell Lily less. He left this morning already." David felt a lump rising in his throat. His loved ones were leaving, and he couldn't do anything about it. Perhaps in everyone's life, there comes a moment when a series of losses begins, which is impossible to get used to. "Hold on. You need to pull yourself together now. Then you can let your feelings out. We're at the station. Call when you can." Going downstairs, she found that Lily was standing by the car. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course, my dear. Anything. Promise not to lie to me." "I promise," his wife Sarah blurted out before she could think. "Why did we come here? Just tell me honestly." His wife Sarah understood that she couldn't invent any more lies. "Your biological father lived in this house for the last few days. He lived here until this morning. He passed away. Please accept my condolences. We wanted to introduce you, but we didn't get the chance." For a few minutes, the girl was confused and couldn't say anything. Finally, she composed herself and said, "I want to see him. I won't be scared. I need to see him at least once, to remember him. Sunshine, is it worth it? He's gone. Are your parents alive?" "My mother Carol is. My father Bob passed away a long time ago." "Did you see him before he died?" "Of course. Then I want to see him at least once, too." "All right, let's go into the house." They entered quietly. David was already calling the ambulance and the police at this time. He froze with the phone in his hand, stopping mid-sentence, and looked at his wife questioningly. It has to be done, she told him. She took the girl's hand. Where is he? In the bedroom. Not for long. The police will be here soon. You shouldn't be seen. I'll be quick. Don't worry. I'll just look. However, the girl's courage only lasted long enough for her to cautiously step over the threshold and see the figure on the bed. Shrieking, she turned to his wife Sarah and buried her face in her shoulder. The woman hugged the crying girl and quietly led her out of the room. Then she gently guided her to the car and helped her into the seat. They drove to the station in silence. The girl stopped crying, but occasionally wiped away tears with the edge of her collar. Boarding the train didn't take long. Besides, Sarah lay down in her seat and soon fell asleep. But the woman couldn't sleep. In addition to heavy thoughts about their future, worry for her husband was added. He had not only to organize the funeral, but also to try to prove his non-involvement in the presence of the fugitive criminal in his parents' house. In the morning, the train arrived in the city that had become home to his wife. They had lived here with her husband for a long time. Their children had grown up here. There was still a lot of time before the holidays, during which she had to inform her children about the new family member. She woke up early but didn't wake Lily. She just lay there and silently looked out the window. Finally, Lily said, "Do we still have a long way to go?" "No, less than half an hour." "And why did you take me? Who are you to me?" "Your father and my husband were friends since childhood. He asked him to look after you, and my husband couldn't think of anything else but to take you under guardianship. After 18, you will become completely independent and can decide how to live yourself." Sarah wanted to convey with these words that the girl would be able to make important decisions herself, but Lily interpreted them in her own way. "So you just have to tolerate me for 3 years. And that's it? I can just go wherever I want?" "Go, dear. You misunderstood. I only meant that you will become independent, self-sufficient, and we will always try to support you. You can count on us, but you can live however you want. But until then, you'll tolerate me and then kick me out?" "As far as I understand, you're not at all thrilled about the idea of taking in who knows who, born to who knows who. I saw my father. My mother said he was only 3 years older, and that old man I saw yesterday. Who is he? My real father, or an old man who somehow ended up in your husband's house? What about him? Was he homeless? Was he in prison? What?" The woman was struck by the change that had occurred in the girl overnight. Just yesterday she was quiet and reserved, but today she had become quite sharp and rude. "I'm not sure I'm the one who should tell you all this. Just a couple of days ago, I knew nothing about your father or you, just like you. I actually thought my husband had a mistress in his hometown, and then I saw him buying clothes for you and decided you were his daughter. I bought a train ticket and followed him, and there I met him and your father, and they explained everything to me. Honestly, I was shocked, but I understand my husband. He couldn't have done otherwise. And that means we all have to accept this fact and learn to live together, to conflict, or to learn to cooperate. That's your decision. You are an adult. We will provide you with a proper quality of life, but how our communication will be depends only on you." It seemed that such a direct answer somewhat calmed the girl's rising anger. Moreover, his wife Sarah had been warned that such a reaction was normal. Perhaps this way it would be easier for the girl to cope with the pain of losing her loved ones, and his wife Sarah, as an adult, had to support her. It's amazing how quickly a complete stranger can become close. Just yesterday, his wife Sarah had absolutely no desire to take a stranger's child into the family, but today she felt so sorry for the girl that she couldn't leave her alone without support in this difficult world. The woman gently took the girl's hand and said, "I know you're angry at everyone, including us, because fate has been so cruel to you. If you need to, be angry, vent your emotions, but don't harbor hatred towards us. We sincerely want to help you. As soon as you turn 18, you can claim your parents' property and move out from us. Until then, we all need to learn to live together amicably. And you won't abandon me?" The girl's voice trembled. It seemed she was about to cry. "No, We won't abandon you, if it's up to us alone. Your parents didn't abandon you either. They left against their will. Tell me about my father, please. My dear, I can't. I know almost nothing about him. All I can say is he was very ill. That's why he looked that way. Your guardian, David, can tell you more. They were friends since childhood. I remember him telling me how your father saved his life. Really? How? Tell me. We've arrived. I'll tell you that story at home, and tomorrow we'll go enroll you in school. I never thought I'd go back there. Did your children study there? Yes, and it's a good school, with strong, experienced teachers. My children even got into the universities they chose without tutors. And I had a good school too, but my parents still hired a bunch of tutors for me. They cared about you. They wanted you to have a wealth of knowledge from childhood and not turn out like your father. I once overheard their conversation. He said he would pay any money for tutors, put me in any schools and clubs, just so my father's genes wouldn't show. And yet, he only wanted the best for you. It's just that sometimes adults, wanting to do something good, go a little overboard, not considering the child's wishes. They only arrived home by noon. His wife Sarah called her shop, warning them she wouldn't be there for a couple of days. She took time off. Her colleague was surprised but didn't ask any questions. In all their time working together, she had only taken unexpected days off a couple of times. She loved her job very much and dedicated a lot of time to it. And his wife Sarah decided to spend that day with the girl to help her adapt a little. Her husband didn't call. This was starting to worry her. She was afraid to call herself, afraid of hearing something bad. In the evening, she decided to call the children and inform them that a new member had joined the family. She called her son Tom first. For some reason, it was always easier for her to talk to men. Her son's first reaction was unexpected. "Mom, are you sure this is a good idea? An adult girl with such psychological trauma? What could come of this? You and Dad were never known for harshness or strictness in parenting. The fact that my sister Emily and I grew up the way we did is only because of your example. But we grew up with you. And this girl didn't. She was raised strictly. What will happen when she feels that you won't be so strict? 15 is the most difficult age, even when everything in life is calm, and she has lost her entire family." Her son Tom seemed to voice all her hidden fears. She herself understood everything her son was telling her. She understood and was afraid. Therefore, she decided to be a little stricter with the girl at first so that she wouldn't take advantage. Her daughter Emily supported her brother's concerns. She was more lively and assertive in their pair, sometimes even defending her brother. But here she completely agreed with him. The girl needed to be accustomed to freedom gradually. Otherwise, she would harm herself. His wife Sarah was struck by the fact that the children didn't object to their parents' decision, didn't ask unnecessary questions. Apparently, they had long been accustomed to their parents making only well-considered and thoughtful decisions. Besides, Mom said it was Dad's decision, which meant arguing was useless. In the evening, her husband called. From his voice, it was clear that he was very tired. After he and the girl left, he waited for the ambulance and police, reporting that he had found an unknown man in the house. The death was natural, so the deceased Mark didn't arouse much interest from the police. However, after lunch, a detective called and invited him to come in. Can you imagine he invited me? Apparently, professional ethics have reached our valiant police as well. In short, I was informed that the discovered Mark is a fugitive criminal. He escaped from prison. He came to the city, apparently, because there was nowhere else to go. In short, I took responsibility for the funeral. No one was surprised by this, especially since I said we were friends in childhood. I'm leaving tomorrow afternoon. The police have no questions for me, no reason for an investigation, and no reason to create problems for me. Thank God. I was so worried. And how are things with you? My son Tom called, sharing his concerns. I called both of them. They accepted our decision unexpectedly easily, but both said to be stricter with the girl at first. I agree with them, although it's not our method. However, his wife Sarah couldn't follow the advice. In the evening, the girl asked to go out for a walk. His wife Sarah offered to accompany her, but she categorically refused. citing that she was already an adult, going out for a short time and not far. I won't go far enough from the house to get lost. You have my phone number, and I memorized yours. Okay, but try to be back by 7 in the evening. I understand it's early for a teenager, but you don't know the city. Besides, our neighborhood isn't the safest. Even though you're quite grown up, you look like a little girl. When I first saw you, I thought you were no older than 12. Be careful. Or do you want me to walk with you? No, I want to be alone for a bit. Okay, but try to keep your phone on. The girl nodded and left the house. After 7 in the evening, his wife Sarah decided to call herself. The girl's phone was off. After half an hour of fruitless calls, the woman decided to go look for the girl. It was already starting to get dark outside. Sparse passers-by hurried home, wrapping their collars against the biting wind. After going around the house, all the nearby squares and courtyards, his wife Sarah decided to call her husband. He was just about to board the train home. What happened? The girl is missing. She asked to walk around the neighborhood. We agreed she'd be back by 7 and her phone would be on. Now it's 8:30 and her phone is off. Should I go to the police? They won't even take a report from you. I think this is her way of testing the boundaries. This is exactly what we talked about. We can't let her manipulate us. Otherwise, we won't cope. I'll come in the morning and we'll find her together if she doesn't come back sooner. However, even in the morning after her husband arrived, there was no news from the girl. It was decided to go to the police, as the girl didn't know the city and could be in trouble. Her husband asked his wife Sarah to wait for him outside, and he spoke to a police officer. Listen, could you give me the addresses of places where young people gather in our city? But you said the girl was quiet and modest? The girl was just brought from a small town yesterday, and before that she grew up in total strictness. I see. I'll look now. There are quite a few such places here, to be honest. It would be good for her not to end up there. Our local rascals quickly turn such sheltered girls into homeless ones. Try to keep a better eye on the child. After receiving a printout of addresses, the husband and wife decided to start looking for the girl themselves. After driving to several addresses, they realized how incredibly lucky they were with their own children. Not once had their children caused them such intense worry. Both Tom and Emily grew up active, but not reckless, of course. Like all teenagers, they got into different situations, but their parents never had to look for them in such places or go to the police. Her husband David waited for his wife to say that he had caused all this and dragged her into it, but his wife Sarah, as in many other situations, was supportive and tried to help. They took on this responsibility together. Blaming her husband was pointless. In one of the courtyards, on a bench, they found the girl sleeping. They had to make an effort to wake her up. To their surprise, she didn't smell of alcohol. As she later explained herself, she had simply decided to go for a walk and had wandered around the city for almost a day until she fell asleep from exhaustion on the nearest bench. She had deliberately turned off her phone. She wanted to be alone and think. And didn't you think we would worry? I did. I won't apologize. With these words, she turned away to the window and remained silent until they got home. At home, her husband David decided to talk to her himself. Girl, your guardian, Sarah, said you were asking about your father. Well, listen. I have never seen a more honest and just person, ready to go through fire and water for a friend. He himself was ready to go without eating for days, but bring something tasty to his sisters. He pulled me out of the icy water, although he could have died himself, as he was half my size. He had a hard life, got involved with bad company, went to prison. Yes, your father was a criminal, but he knew how to admit his mistakes. In this, you are definitely not like him. I don't see his honesty in you, his openness, his gratitude for kindness, none of what I valued and loved him for so much. If you want to live with us, you must live by our rules. Call so we don't worry, keep promises, obey, be respectful. I understand you're not thrilled about living with strangers. If it's that difficult for you, I'll take you back to the small town. Just 3 years, and freedom. Go wherever you want, you are your own boss. But if you want to have a family, loved ones, support, and love, learn to adapt. We didn't force our children to be obedient, they learned from our example. Our son Tom and daughter Emily are not against you living with us. His wife Sarah and I are ready to give you our attention and care. But if you leave whenever you feel like it, don't answer calls, and then don't apologize, don't unpack your things, we're going back. I'll give you an hour. Think about it. I'm not rushing you, I'm not persuading you, but you either accept our terms or you don't. With these words he left and closed the door behind him, not allowing the girl to say a single word. The hour they gave her to think felt agonizingly long. They could hear her walking around the room, opening and closing the suitcase several times, moving a chair. His wife Sarah and her husband sat silently in the kitchen and exchanged glances at every sound coming from the room. Finally, his wife Sarah said, "Are you sure this is the way? It's time for her to learn to make decisions. Before, adults made them for her, but at some point, you have to grow up. Some people take many years, while others grow up in a couple of weeks. Her father, in my opinion, wasn't a child from childhood. He was responsible for his sisters. I won't judge what happened to him in the years we didn't see each other, but I remember him as mature for his age. By the way, I found out what happened to his parents and sisters. When the children were taken away, the parents, in their joy, went on a long drinking binge, froze the house's heating system, and froze to death. I was about 12 then. The adults didn't tell us, and they didn't tell your friend the truth when he escaped from the orphanage. They lied that his parents had moved. And the sisters? And the sisters repeated their parents' fate. After the orphanage, they found partners like themselves. Your friend mentioned in passing that their lives didn't turn out well. In short, both are alive but lead, to put it mildly, a disreputable lifestyle. Both have children in orphanages. So the girl has at least 3 cousins, sisters, and a brother. How did you find that out? The neighbor, Mrs. Johnson, told me. She recognized me when I was explaining to the police how the fugitive criminal could have ended up in my parents' house. She's a cunning old woman, by the way. She immediately understood that I was lying to them. She saw me come with him and carry groceries, but she didn't report me. So she told me everything. By the way, they all live not far from here. We'll see what the girl decides. Maybe we'll tell her about her relatives. You don't need to. I heard everything. It turned out the girl had been standing behind the door for a long time and had heard the entire conversation. I don't want to live like my father's family. I'm ready to follow all your conditions, especially since yours are even softer than my parents were. Only my mother used to spoil me. Forgive me. I don't know what came over me. You don't owe me anything at all and could have left me in the small town. 5 years passed. The girl graduated from high school with honors and entered college to study psychology. She wanted to help children like her father had been, to help and protect them from the conditions they ended up in, to give them a chance to become normal people. She kept the promise she made to David and his wife Sarah. There wasn't a single problem with her. She studied, tried hard, obeyed, didn't contradict. Gradually, she became family to them. The older children also accepted the girl quite warmly. Their daughter Emily became friends with her younger sister, often helped her choose outfits, and the girls went on vacation together several times. Their son Tom didn't fully accept the girl for a long time, was wary of her, expecting trouble. However, gradually, he also softened. This was greatly helped by the fact that during his studies, he married Jessica and had a son, Leo. "You've become a softie," his sister Emily often told him, teasing her brother without malice, as he could talk for hours about what his child Leo could do. "You just haven't been in my shoes. When you have your own, you'll become just as much of a softie, I assure you." "No way! I don't want to be changing diapers and bottles from a young age. My career and travel are my priorities, but if I want a little child to smear porridge on me, I'll gladly use my nephew." In fact, the girl adored the little one and spared no money or time for his whims. In all the years, David and his wife Sarah never once regretted taking the girl into their family. After the children finished school and moved out, the house seemed empty and quiet. Even though both had jobs they loved, the need to care for someone was felt very acutely. By the time the girl finished college and moved out, their son Tom's family had a grandson, Leo, whom the happy grandparents often took in, giving the young parents a little break. They remembered how hard it was for them without parental help with twins during their student years. The girl couldn't find the strength for several years to meet her father's relatives. Neither of his sisters showed any interest in her, but their children were very happy that besides their parents, they also had normal relatives. The girl tried to visit them often, give small gifts, and tell them about herself and her life. She often remembered her first day in their family. Then she was given a choice: a peaceful life in a family with trust, mutual respect, consideration for interests, love and understanding, or the street. In the couple of weeks she spent in that institution, she understood that she should strive to leave there, not return. She chose family and never regretted it. Despite growing up in a family with a different way of life, she was able to adopt the family values that his wife Sarah instilled in their children. When, several years later, she met a wonderful young man, Michael, and decided to marry him, she first brought him to her parents, David and Sarah, so they could evaluate what kind of person he was from their life experience. And the young man was well liked. Gradually, life returned to its usual course, becoming quiet and peaceful.